Creaking Floorboards. From the moment Lucas stepped foot in the old house, he knew something wasn't right. The air inside was heavy, thick with the musty scent of decay and time. The floors creaked under his weight, as if protesting his presence. The house had belonged to his uncle, an eccentric man who lived alone and was rarely seen by anyone in the last few years before he died. When Lucas inherited it, he wasn't exactly thrilled, but a free house was hard to pass up. The town had its stories about the place, whispers of strange happenings, of people who entered but didn't stay long. Lucas didn't buy into ghost stories, but as he stood in the doorway, looking into the shadowy halls, he couldn't shake the unease crawling up his spine. His footsteps echoed through the empty house as he moved from room to room, each one filled with dusty furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts of the past. The air was stale, untouched for years, and each room felt colder than the last. The strange thing was, no matter how still the house was, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, waiting. Every creak in the floorboards felt deliberate, like something was shifting just beneath his feet. He brushed it off as paranoia. That evening, after cleaning out some of the clutter, Lucas settled in for the night. He had found an old mattress in one of the rooms upstairs and figured it would do until he could bring in his own furniture. He was exhausted from the day's work, but as soon as he lay down, the noises started. At first, it was subtle, a soft creak in the hallway, followed by the sound of something faintly brushing against the walls. Lucas told himself it was just the house settling, the old wood groaning as it adjusted to the night air. But then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate. They started just outside the room and crept down the hallway. Lucas froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He strained his ears, listening. The footsteps were getting closer, the old wood moaning with each step. He tried to convince himself it was all in his head. No one else was in the house. No one else could be in the house. The footsteps stopped just outside his door. Lucas held his breath, his heart racing so fast he thought it might burst. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack he saw his shadow. It was faint, but unmistakable, a figure standing just on the other side. He shot up, grabbed the flashlight from beside him, and swung the beam toward the door. The hallway was empty. Lucas let out a shaky breath, wiping the sweat from his brow. "It's just an old house," he muttered to himself. "Nothing to worry about." But as he lay back down, the footsteps started again. This time, they didn't stop outside the door. They entered the room. Lucas bolted upright, pointing the flashlight in every direction, but the room was empty. The only thing he could see was the dust, swirling in the beam of light. His skin prickled with cold sweat, and his heart thudded in his chest like a drum. And then, from the far corner of the room, he heard it breathing. Faint, shallow, but unmistakable. It wasn't his own. It was something else. Something lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Lucas scrambled out of bed, backing toward the door. His flashlight flickered, and for a split second, he saw it. A figure, darker than the shadows, standing in the corner. Its head tilted toward him, as if it had been watching him the whole time. He ran, down the hallway, through the creaking, groaning house, the sound of footsteps following close behind. They were faster now, more urgent, as though whatever it was had grown tired of waiting. Lucas could feel it, the weight of its presence right behind him, almost close enough to touch. He reached the front door, yanked it open, and stumbled outside into the cool night air. His heart was racing, and his lungs burned, but he didn't stop running until he reached his car. He glanced back only once, and there, standing in the doorway of the house, was the shadow. It didn't move. It didn't chase him. It just watched. Lucas never went back to that house again. The next morning, he contacted a realtor, desperate to sell the place. He didn't care about the money anymore. All he wanted was to be rid of it, to never feel those footsteps behind him again. But every night, when he tried to sleep, he still heard them. The creaking of floorboards, the slow, deliberate footsteps. And sometimes, just outside his door, he could still see the faintest outline of a shadow, waiting, watching. And he knew, no matter how far he ran, the house wasn't done with him yet.